Oops. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We have a really great webinar for you. Just want to welcome you to the GPN, the Geospatial Professional Network. If you're not familiar with us, we are an incredible network that brings together emerging and professional GIS practitioners and geospatial practitioners from across the country. We have some great educational opportunities, some great webinars. This is one of them. I will introduce the host, the panelist that we have today. So really excited about it. For your information, we have a couple of other leadership opportunities, learning opportunities, leadership, the GIS Leadership Academy coming up in December 8th through the 12th in Savannah, Georgia. So that's next week. I'm really looking forward to that because I'm one of the instructors. So it's going to be a great time. I think the weather is going to be perfect since it was 12 degrees yesterday here. I'm looking forward to 65 in Savannah. We also have CalGIS coming up in January in Redlands, the LEAP conference in March, which is a virtual conference. So that one's going to be a fantastic one as well. So I encourage you to attend that one. And the GIS Valtech conference in Mobile, Alabama. We also wanted to point out that this year we're going to be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This past year we were in Denver, so my hometown, which I really appreciate coming here for everything. But also we're going to be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is going to be another one that's going to be fantastic. And that's in October of 2026. Of course, we'll have some more additional learning opportunities and webinars that are coming up. But that one's going to be our big one that we have every year. Also wanted to point out that the GPN now has a learning annex. So the URL at the bottom, if you're a member of the GPN, you can be part of this. There's actually opportunities for that. If you're not a member, we encourage you to join, and you can learn at your own schedule. You can also earn certifications for completion. So another great opportunity for you to get involved and learn. We have a lot of different programs. If you're looking to take the exam for the GISP, we have programs for that. We have a lot of different other opportunities for that too. So just really want to welcome you all. If you're interested, I know there's a huge crowd out there, so I'm really excited about that. But if you're interested in joining the GPN, here's the link for you. You can use the QR code, or you can join through the URL. And now I will turn it over. So you're all here to obviously hear the Galen. So all latitudes, longitudes, and heights will be changing. Prepare your GIS to reap the benefits. And the description, so I'll read it really quickly because we want to get right to it. For the first time in nearly 40 years, the foundation of all geospatial data in the US is being overhauled to better support our geospatially enabled society and emerging technologies such as GeoAI, digital twins, and digital project delivery. NOAA's National Geodetic Survey defines, maintains, and provides access to the National Spatial Reference System, the NSRS, which serves as the basis for civilian surveying and mapping in the United States. Currently, NGS is in the process of modernizing the NSRS, updating the existing horizontal datums with a suite of geometric reference frames and the vertical datums with a gravimetric derived geopotential datum. And I will go into just introducing Galen right now. There's little bit more to read, but Galen Scott began federal services with NOAA's National Geodetic Survey as a Presidential Management Fellow in 2003. One of his primary roles has been as a geek translator, explaining the complex science and critical applications for geodesy for less technical audiences. And actually, at this point, I will just turn it over to Galen because there's more which we can probably talk more about it too. So take it away, Galen.
Thank you, John. And thank you to GPN for the invitation. I'm really pleased to be able to be here today with you all. I think it's the first time I've spoken to you. And I'm going to share my screen now. All right. Participants can now see my screen. Awesome. And I'm going to hide this little thing here. So, as John said, I'm Galen Scott with NOAA's National Geodetic Survey. I've been around about 22 years now, and been working with the smart folks here that have been creating the modernized reference system for like 17 of those 22 years now. This is something that's been consuming us for a good long time. I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to speak here today. I'm calling this a pre-planning briefing. It's kind of an early conversation about the upcoming modernization of the National Spatial Reference System. And our goal here is to get you thinking about this modernization, not just as a technical update, but as a strategic business decision. Really one that will influence how your agency creates, manages, and shares geospatial data in general. And over the next few minutes, I'll provide an overview of the modernized NSRS and National Geodetic Survey's plans to implement it and why it matters to you as part of the geospatial community. Now, to be clear here, we're not changing, things on the ground aren't changing. We're changing the numbers that related to latitudes, longitudes, and heights. You can kind of think about it like switching between a metric and an imperial ruler. Let's see. All right. Okay, so your first question may be, what is the National Spatial Reference System? And the most concise description is that it is a consistent set of nationwide coordinate systems used for mapping and surveying in the United States. And it's not new, right? We are the nation's oldest science agency. It was created in 1807 by Thomas Jefferson when Lewis and Clark came back, specifically to support commerce and science in the young United States. And today, the NSRS is defined and maintained by my agency, NOAA's National Geodetic Survey. Right? We've got that funny word geodetic in the name, which is derived from geodesy, which is the mathematical and physical science that provides the basis for all surveying, mapping, and navigation. And that's really why we're the nation's oldest science agency, because it's a really foundational, important thing for the country. And I think that the reason that people care and they want to know where things are, and not just in an absolute sense, but where they are in respect to other things. We need this information. We always have, and we always will. And in a sense, the best way to define geodesy may be the science of where things are. So simply put, NSRS is the basis for positioning for civilians in the United States. It's about where things are, how high they are, how far apart they are, the direction between things, and their spatial accuracy. And nowadays, that includes how things change with time. And that's a big deal as part of this new modernized system. There are a lot of ways to describe the NSRS, and the different ways work for different people. And one way I hope that helps is to say that the NSRS essentially defines where zero is. That is, the zero for its coordinate system or their origins, and how to measure from zero to find out where things are. This need has existed ever since the founding of NGS in 1807, but with the huge proliferation of geospatial products and data, the vital importance of accurate locations in modern society, that need has never been greater than it is today. And one of the things I like to do, in terms of explaining what we do in datums and reference systems, is to start with a joke, and that is, have you heard the one about the one-armed fisherman? He caught a fish that was this big. Right? You need that left hand. That left hand is the reference, is the 0 point. When my daughter was born, she was this big. You need that left hand to measure heights and depths and distances. And so it's that reference point for, there we go. So it's the reference point for all geospatial data, right? As I said, the NSRS has been around a long time, and occasionally it gets updated. And that's occurring now, and we call it NSRS modernization. What that means is that all coordinates in the NSRS will change. That's not just change for its own sake, but it's to make the NSRS more accurate, more efficient, and more accessible. And the big question is right now that we're getting, including from lots of organizations, is how do our customers and our partners prepare for modernization? So there's a bunch of things that you can do. The first thing is to evaluate your geospatial workflows to understand how the transition will impact data management, operations, and decision making. You need to assess your dependencies on NGS products and services to ensure continued access and interoperability. It'd be really important now to proactively identify the challenges and opportunities, right? NGS cannot do this for agencies and for everybody else. Everybody, needs to understand their own data, their own workflows, because everybody has a unique situation, and you really have to understand your situation in order to understand how to transition to the modernized system and reap the benefits. And really, it's important to address potential impacts early to reduce operational risks to operational efficiency. In other words, identify the weak points so that they don't catch you by surprise. Acting now will minimize the costs and the complexity going forward. It will never be cheaper to do this than it is today. It will only get more expensive to make this change, right? These changes are coming because the Earth is dynamic and things are moving, and that's just reality, right? And while that's true, NGS's goal isn't to make things more complicated. We want to make things easier. So we're going to try and make this transition from the existing NSRS to the modernized NSRS as simple and painless as possible for everyone. So a natural question people are asking is why? Why are we modernizing the NSRS? And if I had to say one thing, and that would be plate tectonics, right? The map shows a large part of the Earth, including the entire NSRS and all of our operational areas. The Earth is divided into 50 or so tectonic plates, and they're all rotating in different directions, right? In other words, things are moving. And the modernized NSRS will account for this movement. That specifically includes coordinate systems for our four tectonic plates I'll show in a moment. We account for tectonic plate rotation, but also deformation within the plate and the plate boundaries. We're accounting for earthquakes and subsidence and other types of movement everywhere on Earth, not just on these four plates with the NSRS coordinate systems, but we are monitoring that everywhere. It's just that we define a coordinate system for each of those four tectonic plates to minimize coordinate changes on those plates. We also know the location of the center of the Earth to a much greater accuracy than we ever have before. And this reduces errors in the existing NSRS and really allows things to work much better with satellite systems like GPS. Another important thing to remember here is that the modernized NSRS is also global rather than regional. This means that everything is compatible with the International Terrestrial Reference System and global satellite systems like GPS, which helps a lot when interacting with our global neighbors or using data sets from other sources. So these are the four tectonic plates that we are focused on, and we're creating terrestrial reference frames. And those plates, each of those plates will have a terrestrial reference frame. So North America will have NatRef, the Caribbean plate will have CatRef. Those two are currently combined within NAD 83. So now we know enough now to separate them out and to account for their plate motion and deformation independently. And then the Pacific and the Marianas plates give us PatRef and MatRef. In addition, for the height system, we're replacing NAVD88 with NAPGD 2022, or the North American Pacific Geopotential datum of 2022. Rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? This is not just a vertical datum. It's more than heights. It includes geopotential, deflection, gravity, and the geoid. What's really impressive with it is that it covers 1/4 of the Earth's surface, the entire northwestern hemisphere, and then as well as smaller grids for American Samoa, and then Guam and Commonwealth of Northern Marianas. What you'll notice here is that this gravity-based geoid model that will serve as the foundation for our height system that'll replace NAVD88 is consistent across the entire United States and out into the oceans. The big deal here is that NAVD88 is a leveling-based datum. So only terrestrial observations were used, and that boundary between the land and water was, we didn't really cross it well with NAVD 88. This new model does, which makes things like modeling along the coasts and rivers a lot more, a lot better. So the changes that were the challenges that exist today for all of our different data sources, are a function of the various reference systems that have been used over time. And this image shows all the different data themes and how they all align on top of geodetic control, right? All these other data themes rely on geodetic control to align them and be able to make them interoperable. And while it's not illustrated here, a lot of this goes beyond those four tectonic plates. And again, those are included in the International Terrestrial Reference Frame, which the new system is based upon. So we're not going to go through all the red here. These are all of the different issues and challenges with this variety of different reference systems. One thing to remember specifically here is for WGS 84, anybody that thinks they're getting better than 2 to 3 meters of accuracy with WGS 84, you're not, especially if you're in the civilian realm. There is no such thing as centimeter level WGS 84 positions in the civilian communities. There are a lot of different things here that have developed over time that we are addressing and fixing with the modernized National Spatial Reference System. So in a very real sense, using the modernized NSRS is a solution to a lot of those challenges that folks are facing now with the variety of different coordinate systems. And there's more to it than that. The modernized NSRS will be the set of official and best coordinate systems for the United States defined by NGS. In terms of how it is justified, the modernized system will be recognized by the Federal Geodetic Control Subcommittee, which is the Geodetic Advisory Work Group under the Federal Geographic Data Committee. And the subcommittee includes representations from many different federal agencies. And in addition, use of the NSRS is required for civilian federal agencies per OMBA 16, as well as the Geospatial Data Act. So, beyond those requirements for federal agencies, the NSRS, of course, is used by most state and local governments as well as private industry. It is a widely used and it's a popular system. And we can do better, so we should be doing better now. And that's what modernization is about. So before we get into the details of modernization, I want to take a moment to just refresh our understanding of what a datum actually is, because it's the foundation to everything that follows, right? A geospatial datum is essentially a reference for where. It defines the origin, which is where is the 0 point, like latitude, longitude, and height. It defines the orientation, which direction is north and what is considered up. And the shape, the mathematical surface we are using to represent the Earth. You can think of all of this like a baseline map that tells us where everything is. If the datum shifts, even slightly, it can make everything appear to move, right? You can see that shift in the image there. I'm using this illustration to exaggerate what happens during modernization. The physical features haven't moved, but the coordinates and the coordinate reference has changed. So it looks like everything has shifted. So why does this matter? For accurate navigation, for reliable mapping and surveying, for consistent data integration across federal and state agencies and geospatial themes. And the key takeaway here is if your data doesn't match the datum, your map is not telling the truth. Datums are a fundamental component of the National Spatial Reference System, and we'll keep building on this idea of a shift in the next slides. All right. So I like this part. Let me take a drink here. You've heard of shake and bake? Well, at NGS, we talk about shift and drift. And what that means is that there will be two components of movement for modernization. One is a sudden shift that will cause all coordinates to instantly change from what they are now to their new values. And that will be a change of about 1.5 to 12 feet horizontally and at least 6 feet vertically, depending on location. The other component is a slow, continuous drift due mainly to tectonic plate rotation, punctuated occasionally by things like earthquakes, but also impacted by things like subsidence and crustal motion. You know, the drift is up to about 4 inches per year, and we remove most of that by modeling crustal motion to try and keep that transparent to the user and reduce the complexity for you. In the modernized NSRS, coordinates will always have a date associated with them. When you provide or receive coordinates or data source, you won't simply say, here are my coordinates. You will say, here are my coordinates at this date or epoch. Time is part of the modernized NSRS definition. Coordinates will always have a date associated with them because they change with time, even though the reference system itself stays the same. Now, this may sound complicated, but it's actually a good thing because things on Earth are moving, and our positioning capability today is so good that we can no longer ignore this movement. The modernized NSRS is being developed with models and tools to account for such temporal changes so you don't have to. So just to give you an idea of the magnitude, here's a map of CONUS showing the horizontal change in coordinates in feet for the sudden coordinate shift from NAD 83. The change ranges from about 2.5 feet in southern Florida to more than 6 feet in California, with an even greater change near 2 earthquakes shown here that happened between the dates of the old and the new coordinates. The largest shift occurs in the Pacific, of more than 12 feet in some places. And this is the map of showing predicted shift in elevation for CONUS. They range from essentially 0 in the southern Florida to more than 4-foot decrease in elevation across the Pacific Northwest. And this is the model of plate rotation. Again, this is what we are taking out so that we are accounting for plate rotation. And you can see that the North American plate and the Pacific plate out here in California are moving differently. And things get we can think of that as a crunch zone. So we are modeling that in these plate rotation models, as well as what we call an intra-frame deformation model to account for uplift and subsidence and other ways that the Earth's surface is changing over time. So what's affected? What kind of data is affected by this? Well, I think potentially all of the national geospatial data assets, the NGDA themes, are affected, right? And all of this data needs to be evaluated to understand the impact of the change and the applications and the accuracy requirements of what you're using this data for. As I mentioned earlier, the geodetic control underpins all of the other foundational themes, which in turn the other themes build upon. Many of the federal agencies that are responsible for this data and their corresponding lead agencies, they serve as both users and producers of geospatial data, and they rely heavily on GIS to support their operations. This includes mapping and charting of our rivers and coasts, sharing and distributing nationwide elevation data sets and derived products like digital elevation models. It also includes roads and rail lines and other transportation networks, state and governmental boundaries, along with other critical data sets, right? Your agency's collaborative data sharing or research efforts will be more effective and more interoperable when grounded in a common reference system such as the NSRS. So switching gears a little bit here to some specifics. Right now, part of this is the state plane coordinate system, right? So the SPCS, or State Plane Coordinate System of 2022, represents the third generation of this system, following SPCS 27 and 83. It's a key part of the upcoming modernization of the NSRS, and it will be aligned with the 2022 terrestrial reference frames that I just mentioned. As you can see in this map, the number of SPCS 2022 zones varies significantly by state. Every state and territory will have at least one statewide zone, which is specifically for the GIS community. But many of the states will also include additional layers, such as multi-zone layers that cover either the entire state or just part of it. These were designed in collaboration with many state stakeholders to balance user needs for precision, accuracy, and coverage. So in total, SPCS 2022 introduces a more flexible structure, allowing for up to 3 zone layers per state. And for additional applications that span beyond state boundaries, there are even a few special use zones that cross state lines. So this is a tailored modern approach that reflects both technological advances and evolving geospatial workflows across the country. This slide here shows a comparison of linear distortion between the new SPCS 2022 zones and the existing SPCS 83 zones. So one of the key goals of SPCS 2022 is to reduce the distortion over large areas, particularly in statewide zones, by optimizing the projection parameters for each zone based on the stakeholder input and the modern geospatial needs. So this is the existing SPCS 83 zones and their distortions. And there you go with the modern new distortion. As this distortion map shows, the new designs generally result in lower and more evenly distributed distortion across each state. And this is especially beneficial for high precision applications like engineering, surveying, and infrastructure development. And the symbology on these maps are very similar to really be able to highlight the, for you, so you can visually see the changes, right? So just going back from that, high distortion, particularly in mountainous areas, to much lower distortion. This is now available. The SPCS state plane zone definitions are now available on our beta site, and they're already being picked up by Trimble and Esri and others and building them into their system. So ultimately, this refinement and distortion modeling improves positional accuracy and supports a smoother transition to the modernized National Spatial Reference System. So what's important to know is that the software you use will be affected, and we're working directly with the major vendors. So what kind of software will be affected? Anything that you use where you visualize geospatial data, transform geospatial data, or even store spatial data. So this includes GIS packages like QGIS and Esri. It includes transformation tools like Blue Marble or the Proj open source software, as well as the spatial database management systems that you store your geospatial data in with all of its attributes and relationships. So the software you use today will be affected by these changes, and it may take different amounts of time for these different software packages to implement the new datums and transformations. We are actively in conversation with these folks. We've hosted several industry workshops to work with commercial and open source communities to inform them of these changes and how they can evaluate these changes prior to the production release. So we've been working, having regular meetings with these folks since like 2018. So my hope here is that the NSRS modernization is not simply viewed as a burden. There will be benefits. One of those benefits is that it provides greater accuracy and precision. And although these words are often used interchangeably, they're not the same thing, right? We know that. One thing to think of is that accuracy is telling the truth, but precision is telling the same story over and over again. That story may be true or it may be false, but the point is that it's the same repeated story. And the ideal case for spatial data is that it is both accurate and precise, and that you know how accurate and precise it is. Another big benefits here is that it supports the important FAIR principles for spatial data, right? Findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And as mentioned before, it can help identify, this transition to the modernized system can help identify issues with spatial data inherited from the past, such as those with NAD 27 or NAD 83, WGS 84, and the deprecation of the US survey foot. More than identify, it can help quantify the magnitude of the improvement in spatial data quality achieved through modernization. Another thing is that it will future-proof your data and your workflows. The modernized NSRS will be in use for decades, right? And unlike previous versions, allowance for change will be built into it. So that is going to improve its usability over time. And it also enables better coordination between federal agencies and state agencies and external parties because everything is well-defined and consistent. And as I said before, modernizing now prevents more costly adoption later, right? Planning and being proactive will make for a smoother transition. And outside, coordinating with other agencies and partners helps to facilitate data sharing and collaboration, and it will help in doing things consistently during the change. So as for NSRS modernization itself, it's nearly done. Which is really exciting. We're really standing on the precipice of history with this. For the first time in 40 years, changing the fundamental infrastructure underpinning of all of our geospatial data for the geospatial community. Right? We started this process in 2007, so it's been ongoing for most of my career. So the big question is when, and unfortunately, given our 43-day pause, we're still kind of evaluating the impact. But the preliminary release of the NSRS, modernized NSRS, has already begun. We did the initial beta release for the definitional products in 2025. Those are out on our beta website right now. And that includes the state plane coordinate system, the terrestrial reference frame, North American Pacific geopotential datum, and the GeoAI, and a preliminary conversion tool to look at the state plane coordinate system. We plan to release the remaining beta release of tools in 2026, and then these, these releases are for testing and evaluation only. We will replace the current datums with the new datums once testing is complete. And that means that at least 6 months after all of the preliminary beta releases are put out on our website, we will have at least 6 months for beta testing and for people to get used to it before it becomes official. And that it would become official after Federal Geographic Data Committee review, the FGDC. To be clear, NGS will continue supporting the current NSRS throughout the rollout and testing of the modernized NSRS. So the next steps. For the next steps for modernization, that's you. We recommend that you and your agency evaluate your operational needs. An important part of that is to identify changes that are unnecessary, and I'll get to that in a moment. But other things to consider include assessing your organizational impacts and your staff readiness. Are you or will you be ready for modernization? How will your existing program and regional support be impacted? For interagency collaboration, so that you can align shared data sets, reduce redundancy, and maximize efficiency. You need to consider leadership and communication, including getting the word out throughout your organizations so that people understand what's going on and why, and the benefits to be derived. And I encourage you to consider how modernization can be used to plan for future improvements in spatial data accuracy. Although you may not need such accuracy now, that may change in the future. After all, there's a continuous drive for greater accuracy throughout the geospatial system. So really important thing to note here is that is to understand that your lower accuracy data sets may require no change at all other than the metadata associated with it. And that cutoff point is around 10 feet of accuracy. If you need to be more, if your data and your accuracy requirements are better than 10 feet, then you're going to need to really consider how you're making this transition. If your accuracy requirements are greater than 10 feet, then you probably don't need to be changing anything at all except for its metadata, right? So the important thing is to identify that data up front, because it really could save you a lot of work and time. And keep in mind that NSRS modernization is more than a technical update. It's an opportunity to enhance your geospatial capabilities for the future. It's going to help you resolve some of the issues that you're facing with your data right now. And lastly, what NGS needs from you so that we can best help you navigate adoption of the modernized NSRS? Well, most importantly, it should be communication with one voice to ensure that NGS gets consistent input. So I'll talk about this in a second, but I would really love to make sure that the GPN community is plugged in and we have a good direct line of communication so that we can address questions and concerns as they come up. The big picture slide, why are we doing it? Because our society and our economy are becoming more spatially enabled. And the modernized NSRS will help to make all of these things a reality. And one other interesting note here is that I'm sure you've all been hearing about AI and getting your data and your workflows ready for GeoAI. And that process requires going through your metadata and your accuracy requirements and your workflows and things. And so you can really think about it. Anytime somebody's talking about getting ready for AI, you're getting a twofer, because you're getting ready for AI, but also that same work that you would do to get ready for AI is going to help you transition to the modernized NSRS. So understanding your data, understanding your accuracy requirements, understanding your workflows are all important for both of these things. And we're not doing this alone, right? We're looking at partners as force multipliers. We've got the National Society of Professional Surveyors is out there. They've got an NSRS modernization working group. They've got a webpage out there that has a lot of information on it for surveyors. And the kind of the legal and regulatory and field level adoption issues, particularly for licensed professionals navigating vertical and horizontal datum changes. ASPRS, American Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, also has an NSRS modernization working group. They're more focused on the data formats, software compatibility, high volume transformation of imagery and point clouds and things like that. And then we have Esri is out in front with this. They have their coordinate systems and transformation webpage there. And Trimble has recently just stepped out with this as well. And with that, actually, I'm going to go back one slide and just say two things. One is that we are also working with Canada, right? We are implementing this modernized system with our colleagues in Canada in the Canadian Spatial Reference System. And the other thing is that, and I'll just throw a teaser out there for you, and that is that the tidal datums, the datums of the water levels along the coasts and in the Great Lakes, are also being updated by our sister agency, the Tides and Water Levels group here in NOAA. So that's a kind of something that goes hand in glove with this. That's another full hour-long presentation in itself, but I want to put that on your radar because those datums are changing as well. And with that, I will give you a QR code to our website, and I will pause for questions. All right. I've seen a bunch of comments and stuff going up through there. Oh,
yeah. So Galen, the whole bunch of comments. So Brian's been doing a good job of answering a bunch of questions in the Q&A part of it. So I don't know if anybody has any additional questions for Galen that might come up in here, or that you could probably type either in this chat or in the Q&A. There's still a few that are open. If you want, I can, Brian Campo asked science confusion question here. You stated that the actual location of this is not changing, only the coordinates we use, but also that adjustments are based on the movement on plates and the ground surface from earthquakes and subsidence. So that ground is also moving, right? How are the shifting plates, ground elevations affecting the shifting coordinates?
Yes, thank you for that question. So here's the thing, is that geodesy really does our best to simplify a very complex Earth system. So our datums historically have had to make an assumption that the Earth is kind of static so that we could have a consistent set of coordinates over time. But as our ability to understand the dynamic Earth has improved, as we've gotten more observation systems out there and satellites and ground and GPS antennas showing us how the Earth is actually moving, we're now better able to incorporate those changes of the physical Earth into our system for approximating the Earth, right? So our changing coordinates here are moving to the new system. That's going to change the numbers within your latitudes and longitudes and your heights. But of course, we as a federal agency don't have the power to change things on the ground. But the Earth is changing things on the ground every day anyway. So basically, our technology has improved to the point where we're now able to build these reference systems that account for the dynamic Earth and how things are moving in terms of subsidence and plate deformations and things like that. So I hope that helped.
Yeah. And then Tim Nolan asked, how will the modernization of the NSRS and updated datum affect historic measurements from older surveys, older datums?
So, your older surveys are what they are, and there are different ways to move into the new system. So you're going to have to make a decision about how you get that old data into the new system. And there's three, and this kind of gets into more of the application questions. And again, we can go down, into further detail in another webinar later, probably with Brian Shaw here. But where did that question go? But basically, you're going to have to decide whether your accuracy requirements can be met by transforming old data into the new system, which will introduce additional uncertainty and error, or whether you'll need to, for example, reprocess and readjust old observations in the new system using the new models to meet your accuracy requirements, or whether you'll just have to go out and recollect new observations to meet your accuracy requirements. So there is we do have tools like NCAT and VDatum to do transformations between the old systems and the new systems, but you'll have to remember that doing a transformation will add additional uncertainty to your products, and you have to do the evaluation of whether that uncertainty is acceptable or not.
Okay. Next one is Joel. Regarding change every year, it is my understanding if someone is, say, using an N-trip augmentation by a service holding an epoch, then until that station moves to align with NSRS every 5 to 10 years, the end user is holding, quotation marks, the same base coordinate, and that won't change every year. Is that correct?
First of all, hi, Joel. But yes. Well, I'm going to temper my answer by saying that I am not a geodesist. I'm not a surveyor. I just play one at meetings. And when we get into technical details like that, I would definitely defer to a real geodesist. But one of the things that we're trying to do this balance between accounting for the changes of the dynamic Earth without changing things all the time for users and making, having confusion. So one of the things that we're doing is we are creating what are called reference epoch coordinates. And the first set of reference epoch coordinates will be referenced to 2020.00, so January 1st of 2020. And we're going to use the models that we have to move survey observations through time to that common epoch, so everything can be be referenced and aligned appropriately. How often those reference epochs get updated could be every 5 or 10 years. We're still deciding on that, but it really depends on your application. If you're trying to track motion in something, then you'd want to use a different kind of coordinate called a survey epoch coordinate that gives you coordinates at the specific time of your survey. But I'm afraid I'm going down the rabbit hole a little too much for this particular webinar, Joel, and we can certainly have you talk to some of the more, the folks that can provide more details.
All right, the next one, we got quite a few, so hopefully we'll get to them all. This is from Frank. It is my understanding that the authority and hopefully the funding for NOAA to do this work, as well as manage the space-based systems needed to make all GNSS work, is in the Weather Act, HR 5089, which is in Congress right now. Would you recommend people on this call write letters and make phone calls to support the Weather Act?
Hi, Frank, and thanks for the plug. I will encourage folks to play the game as they and participate in the process as they can and as they choose. Yes, my understanding is that there is some good language in the Weather Act, and yes, having support would be good. I think that's a really important question in terms of the authority and the funding for this. The Geospatial Data Act of 2018 provided a lot of authority to the Federal Geographic Data Committee to set standards for geospatial data, but didn't necessarily provide any additional funding to do that. So at this point, this is a huge opportunity for the entire geospatial community. And it's going to take resources to really implement it to the point where we all really realize the benefits that it will bring. And to do that, that's going to require funding in many different ways. And I'll have to leave it at that.
Okay. Another question from David is, given how 3857 is so widely used for web mapping, Google, Bing, Esri, web mapping standards, do you foresee that standard changing to reflect NSRS changes?
So we are working with the FGDC standards working group. And yeah, I think there's going to have to be evaluations of what standards are updated to reflect these changes. Our most likely path for this is to get the FGDC standards working group to evaluate and approve the modernized NSRS as the new standard for spatial reference for geospatial data. And once that happens, then the Geospatial Data Act has requirements about federal agencies in particular and federal funding going to geospatial projects that meet the standards. So yes, there will need to be some real consideration of what standards will need to be updated, and that again is why we are working with our partners to make sure that we get all those different things that people can think of that might be affected addressed in an appropriate way. Yeah.
Great. And then another one from Mike. You said the new NSRS would be seamless into the water. So how will the new tidal datums be related?
Hi, Mike. So first of all, there's a difference here. What I mean by it'll be seamless into the water, and that is that NAVD88, because it is a leveling based datum, it stops at the shoreline. And that's because, as my buddy Dave Doyle says, unless the Lord Almighty was your party chief, you're not leveling across large bodies of water. So the new system is not based on terrestrial measurements. It's based on gravity measurements from satellites and aircraft and surface measurements. So NAVD88 stops at the shoreline, but NAPGD 2022 goes across the shoreline. So you'll have a consistent reference surface for heights, both onshore and offshore. Now, the tidal datums themselves, high water, mean sea level, mean low water, those things that co-ops puts out, those are being updated as well. And that's called the National Tidal Datum Epic. And we are shifting, and that's the NTDE is an 19-year period over which they average tidal observations. And so co-ops, our Tides and Currents group here, is updating that National Tidal Datum Epic. And so for each tide station, they will have updated tidal datums, and those tidal datums will be referenced to NAPGD at those stations. So you can see how the water levels and the land elevations relate at that particular spot on the coast.
Okay. And this one's from the chat. So I'll go back to the Q&A as well, but who will be responsible to make changes on national admin and political boundaries data with the NSRS? Do we have to wait for the software like Esri to adopt it first?
So again, all of the different federal agencies that are responsible for putting out different geospatial data sets like political boundaries, those will be done at the federal agency level and will be promulgated out. And then the vendors are going to pick that stuff up and serve it up. So yeah, I know a lot of folks that we talk to say, if it's in Esri, we're going to be good. So yes, we will have to wait until, Esri is able to put this stuff out. But I can tell you that they are, they're working on it hard right now. They're putting out some educational material and other resources, and they've got some great webinars and presentations about kind of forensic geodesy, understanding your data and what flavor of NAD83 you may have, and how to get it all kind of aligned and ready for this transition to the new terrestrial reference frames.
Okay. Moving on, Matt, it said, I might have missed it, but why was Juan de Fuca not included with the plates mentioned at the top of the presentation? Is it covered somewhere else within NSRS and partners, or is it included with one of its neighboring plates, or is it just not covered?
So I will expose my ignorance here. My understanding is that the 4 plates that we have terrestrial reference frames are the 4 plates where we have U.S. civilian population on those plates that we need to serve. So I'm not sure if Juan de Fuca fits that or not. But that was the idea, was that we are modeling the plates where we have U.S. population that we need to serve.
And it looks like Brian answered in the chat, just not covered.
Okay.
Okay.
Brian.
So from Dave, it is essential that NWS be tracking this closely with their modeling and forecast systems to more accurately warn people of threats such as flooding. As warnings become more finely tuned with GIS warning, polygons, etc., this could be a matter of life, death in some instances. Who in NWS is in charge of making sure all NWS systems take this into account?
Very good question, Dave. And we don't have anybody specific in NWS, but we are actively engaged with them and with their modeling crews. That's a big question for the Weather Service, but the improvements to floodplain maps and understanding where water will go is the biggest benefit for this modernized system. So they are definitely on our radar, and you may know our new NOAA administrator is a big modeler, and I have no doubt that we will be talking way more closely with them in the near future to make sure that it's incorporated.
Okay. And we have a question from Eric. Can you address whether GIS organizations should prepare in part by staging their data to NAD 83 2011 first, or wait to see if it's a single step transformation is provided by their software, either GDAL or Esri, et cetera?
That's a great question, and what we've been saying is yes, get your data to NAD 8311. NAD 83 2011 first, because then it will be a single step. One of the interesting things about the Esri presentation that they do is, if you've got data sets that have been collected over a long period of time, where all that data has been put together, you very well may have different versions of NAD 83, or different parts of your data reference to different flavors of NAD 83. So sorting that out and getting those transformed now will make your life a lot easier, especially getting in there and understanding what what you're referenced to, which version of NAD 83 you're referenced to. Right now in Esri software, it's a custom 5-step transformation to be able to go from some of the earlier NAD 83 versions up to the new one. So I know that they're working on that. They've got some great presentations out there, and again, their website here has a lot of good information.
All right. And there's a couple kind of on this topic, and it's the transformation from the current data. So should we be expected to project our GIS data from NAD 83 to NSRS 2022?
I would say yes, and it really depends on your applications, right? There's a reason we're making these modernized systems, and that is because they are much better, right? So moving things to the new system is going to allow you to really access the benefits, the increased accuracy and the increased precisions of the new system. So yeah. And again, I mentioned it before, but it's going to depend on how you make that transition, whether you transform your data and add additional uncertainty, whether you reprocess existing observations and then recreate your geospatial products in the new system, or whether you go out and reobserve everything and start from scratch. That really depends on your accuracy requirements and all of that. And that's the kind of evaluation that I'm encouraging you all to do now, in terms of understanding the data that you have, your goals, and kind of plotting that path forward.
All right. And I think we have maybe time for one more question. And this is from John. Surveyors need a combo factor for some of our work. Could NOAA provide an app that would provide ellipsoid height at a given mobile device location? And how accurate would that be?
That's an interesting question. I know that we provide a lot of different tools. I don't know if Brian has a comment on that. I know that we have plans. We have the NGS map. We have NCAT and other transformation tools. How accurate your heights with a mobile device would be will really depend on your mobile device, and the GPS unit in there. So I'm not quite sure what to say about that one. But John, please reach out to us, ngs.feedback@noaa.gov. We'd be glad to answer questions, more specific questions.
And just because this was asked in a couple of different questions, this will be the last one, but how will current NGS monument data sheets be affected and or updated when NSRS goes live?
That's a great question. So we are now working on our passive marks page, our geodetic marks pages, and those pages are being designed to represent all of the data with the new coordinates, and to be kind of dynamic and allow you to kind of display the information that you are specifically interested in. You'll still have access in some way to historic data sheets that are deprecated. But yeah, there's going to be new. One thing you can do is look at our new cores pages. The pages for our continuously operating GPS reference stations on our website have been updated recently to have some more of that look and feel and functionality for being able to kind of get in there and get the information that you're looking for from the data sheets.
All right. And I think that is all we have for today. I know we could probably sit on this topic and talk about it for a long time. Appreciate everybody's participation. Galen, is there a way, I know you mentioned earlier that there's to send questions, but is there a specific way that you'd like to have other questions be presented to you or NOAA?
I'll say we are accepting feedback on all of our products and such. And the email address for that is ngs.feedback@noaa.gov. But you're also welcome to email me, galen.scott@noaa.gov, galen.scott@noaa.gov. I am the constituent manager. My role is to help our community make the transition as easily as possible.
Yeah, thank you again. Thanks so much for doing this, and thanks for everybody that joined. It's obviously a very, very important topic for us. So we'll keep it going. We'll keep the conversation going, and maybe have more webinars on this in the future, because I know it's going to be something that we're going to have to deal with over the next few years. So again, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all very much. I really appreciate it.